maybe not. Maybe it would be more advantageous for me to not take that risk and just wait and stake and let all the competition happen and get all the yield. And then after all the yield and I see how everything played out, see how many are left over, then go in there with my Hedron and pick them off and not have any competition at all.
Yeah.
Because if I meet my minimum stake length, then technically I can just unstake it later and do all of it.
How many auctions will there be the first day?
2,600, something like that.
Oh, is it only 2,600? Okay.
What do you mean that's only on the first 24-hour period? 2,600. Jeez Louise, only. All right, fat sacks over there. Calm down. That's a lot.
I think that for a person, right, you will have difficulty even if you're going all out. I think you'll have difficulty being able to manage bidding on 100 of them. Never mind cost of gas and all that. It would be difficult even to get in on 100 of them to bid. I mean, you can do it. There will be people dedicated enough to do it.
Here's the thing, Crispies. You have to keep this into consideration, and I'll let you continue on your thought process. But take these things into consideration. The bidding time starts the 24-hour clock, and the competition is towards the end of the 24-hour countdowns. So how many are actually at those phases? How many are at the beginning of or haven't been bid on yet? Right? And how many are being bid on and have attention to them by certain people who are involved? There's going to be a lot of moving parts that are happening all at the same time, and different people going all in on one side, starting timers, and then knowing that they're going to be overbid potentially because they're taking the minimum bid, and then utilizing the timing that they had for later 24 hours to take advantage of those ones at that time, right? So if we were able to actually go and have the whole community, this would be crazy, right? The whole community go in and have an initiative to start the 24-hour counters for all of them. There's only 2,600 of them. So if you had like 6,000, 7,000 people all go in there and start all the timers at the same time, as soon as 000 happen, then all of them for the very first day, when the next day another 1,000 of them are going to come in, they'll all be forced to have bids happen all within the last hour. Like it would be literally insane what would happen on some of them, and how many of them would be like lost. Like people would win, other people would win. It'd be like a shotgun lottery if that was the case.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like, especially if you're a small player, that I would say that's advantageous, is to go and start the bids on as many as you possibly can. So that way you could potentially, have a lot more that slips through the cracks because they're all being enabled right away.
Wouldn't that make less Hedron would be burnt in that process now?
Sure, maybe. But the ones that have the competition on them might actually burn more Hedron in the competition of just those individual ones, because people aren't going to have enough time that they're going to want to win something, right? Like they've already put in so much weight in a certain situation and lost the advantage in so many other spots that some of them have more competition and burn more, which would kind of make up for the littler ones that didn't garner so much participation. Like there would be a definitive understanding of which ones would be bid on and which ones would.
I'm going to start the bids on as many small ones that I possibly can.
I think it's going to depend a lot on gas. Like imagine what would happen to the gas prices if we did all go in there and do that to the 2,600 that were there. It might jump the gas up at that time for us to try to all get it within a few minutes of each other, get them all within their 24-hour countdown. You could get a lot of them though, if that was your intention to do, even without 3,000 people to do it and make sure that you covered it, right? But like 6,000 people, then you could be able to guarantee it. Even if gas costs went up, somebody's transaction would go through, right, to start them, right?
Yeah. I think you're going to see probably in the first, I would say 80% of them, if we're talking 2,600, I would say 80% of them will be bid on within the first couple hours.
Yeah, for sure.
And then strategy-wise, I probably wouldn't myself engage in just frivolously initiating them because I think they get taken care of. But I would identify, so this is from my own perspective, right? I want to win something. I probably would identify the top 20 that I'm interested in to watch, and I would get those initiated as soon as possible to the extent I could do it, right? 20 might be too many, right? Depends on my Hedron and all the rest. But to win it in a better situation, I would want as much chaos as possible.
Yep.
But on the other end, it's probably better for the overall ecosystem for it to be orderly. But you can't control all these cats, and they're gonna be running all over the place, pushing buttons.
Well, I mean, if you're interested in like the 20 that you're looking at as a singular individual, then it seems possible, like if there's more people like you that you'd be able to like have that type of focus, that maybe you might overlap each other and then get around in this competition, but still probably might win.
The other thing that happens too is your competition quickly identifies you. So it's just like when you're bidding for anything else, right? If there's this one NPC, let's call it that for now, there's one holder that is specifically targeting certain types of HSIs, then it quickly will identify who your competition will be and who's going to be bidding against you. That's one thing that I see happening if you do that, like what Crispy said. People will start watching separate wallet addresses. That's something that's going to be happening over this period, and that's you know who you're going up against, and you know, okay, this wallet holder has this. Waste of time, or it makes sense to keep going and see which one of us tops out first. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, if you follow that, we're going to have. I'm pretty confident we'll know who the bidders are, and then what the previous bids were, and who the previous bidders are. And so part of that game theory would be to be checking out their wallet to see how much Hedron they appear to have in their wallet.
That's right.
And the same wallet could be the same person using multiple wallets bidding on the same HSI.
Yeah.
And bidding against themselves in
Exactly.
order to create that vision. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. But I think it's interesting because visually, I think the impact of the front end becomes available for use. The understanding of what you're dealing with and the availability of the front end is where now your deployable understanding of tactic is going to be formulated. No matter what you think of now, whatever we get for the front end is going to maybe potentially, unfortunately, just because the information is available, cause for you to have this change of how you decide to handle stuff. So I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how all of it is used, I guess, because you just don't know how people are going to respond to the 2,600 that come through on this front end, and the information that how hawkish are you able to be with it, right? Are you able to like specifically identify ones that you're looking for? Probably. That's what it kind of looks like to me, based off of the back end info that he pointed out, is that you'll be able to filter directly what you're looking for and be able to go directly for those ones, which is kind of neat in my opinion. But it gives you this tunnel view of just the 2,600 that's there. So you have all this information, you can tactfully utilize the ones that are currently visually there. You execute this plan, and then tomorrow at 00 UTC, while everyone's finishing their bids, the next 1,000 of them hit you in the face. And you now have this tunnel view of the day previous has now lifted you into this moment of greater availability of your plan could have been executed wider in preparation for the next day's availability of stuff coming in than what tactfully you did on the very first day to try to win all these other ones and have competition, which actually the competition happened the next day when the next 1,000 actually landed. So I think initially when liquidations start, it's just a bidding phase to get the 24-hour countdown started. The excitement of what's going to happen, where everyone has to be focused about ending the 24-hour periods of all these other ones that started at 00 UTC the day before, and probably other ones still being started from the first day, still happening the second day when new ones come in. But the competition of the ones that are finishing from the initial start is going to distract from, it gives you the availability to those that are being in that competitions, they're not looking. And then the people who aren't participating in that competition are looking, right? They're looking at all the new stuff that's there and being able to develop their plan a little bit more. So it might be a battle of attrition through the first couple of days. I mean, the squid class that has their Hedron staked to get Icosa has a potential to have between like the 900 or to it's up closer to 1,000 of them are going to have like over 1 trillion Hedron or some shit available to them of purchasing power in the liquidations for competition. That's a pretty big available liquid chunk that they're going to have, considering that like that's almost more than what's available through the dexes for liquidity in the first place. It's a lot. And that may not even be enough to buy all of them anyway, right? That may not even be enough to buy all of them in the first place, right? As the longevity of all the HSIs that come out through time, like they could easily burn all their Hedron and win their HSIs and maybe even increase their pool positions in the Icosa position. But now they're out of the Hedron pool completely, right?
That's true.
And then that pool increases for all those that did nothing and just sat there, potentially. Like if you have all your squids, imagine all the squids decided to make that decision. And then there are no squids in the Hedron holding, and the staking of Hedron has now went up like quite a bit. Like that would be nuts.
Well, essentially, this is a 5D chess game with like 4,000 people playing at once.
Yeah, pretty much. But we know that.
Oh, sorry. What did I cut off? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, you know that, like, all the squids aren't going to do that, but some of them probably will. So I guess it depends on, like, how good that move was, like, for the squids that could have done. Like, imagine that. Like, you have a stat that's, like, out a year later to be like, well, the squids that made this move, like, benefited this much. And the ones that didn't, like, benefited this much. And then people are going to be like, oh, and then they're going to go do that. Right, and it's going to swing. It's going to swing everything the other direction to the Icosa pool, right, where everyone's going to go buy and get as much Hedron as they can to get in the staking pool at that point in time because they see the yield on that one's better, right? And then they're going to be like, we need to burn more. We need to da 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 da.
Let's suppose the beast is continuously fed. The best play might actually be just holding on to a Hedron.
Maybe potentially. Because, like I said before, like, if you thought about the supply dynamics, that, like, I think that Hamish said that, like, 30% of the total supply of Hedron is staked, and 30% of, like, 112 trillion is, like, 30 trillion. Well, if you take out, that's a lot staked, right? If you take out the essays Hedron, then that 112 trillion is really, like, what, 53?
Well, 56.
54?
Close to 56.
Yeah, trillion of circulating supply. And then, so then 30 trillion of it's staked. So now you're at 20 trillion, something like that, right? Liquid supply? I mean, circulating supply? A little over.
About 24, 25 trillion.
24 trillion, let's say.
In actual circulating supply, yeah.
Yeah. After all of it's been staked of actual circulating supply.
Yeah.
And then the liquidity that's actually on the dexes is about a little over 1 trillion, right? So altogether between all of them, maybe closer to 2 trillion actual Hedron on the dexes.
Dexes, yeah.
You're sitting at like 22 trillion of actual circulating available supply right now of Hedron. So that's changed your numbers drastically on the available circulating supply, even though it does sound nuts, right? In the trillions of hundreds of trillions, but it's not in reality.
What's the size of the biggest HSI that's up for grabs right now? Anybody know?
Oh, I think it's somewhere around like 1,300 T-shares, I think.
Ooh. To be a 1.3 Q share.
1.3 what? Repeat what you said.
Saying that would be 1.3 Q share.
Q share, okay.
Yeah. So, and there's a couple of them. There's like 4 of them right now of those types of sizes. Like 14 million hex staked. Something like that.
It is.
So that's.
I'm sorry, hex Q share. I didn't know if I was interrupting.
No, sir.
Thinking, okay, along the lines of like the Hedron and, potentially just holding on to it, knowing that it's just going to become more and more rare as time goes on. What if, to further that idea, to take profits into the hex Hedron pair, get my hex, right? And so basically take profits from Hedron in the future into hex, make a Quattro Cinco, and throw it into the contract to essentially encourage what has already happened, which is making Hedron more scarce.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the amount of Hedron that gets burned puts it in a position where it incentivizes borrowing, right? And through the arbitrage of the borrowing, it means people are going to be throwing away HSIs to be able to extract liquid Hedron from the borrow function in it of itself. So it does kind of increase more HSIs to be made that are smaller in that arbitrage through Hedron. However, who gives a shit, really? Like I hate to say that, but the end result is Hex gets bought, which is buy pressure, and then locked up for 15 years and tossed away into a protocol that can use them in a different way. And if somebody decides that they want to hold on to them and pull them together, then so be it, right? Why not? Especially if they're going to be cheap. And I mean for the individual, not necessarily for some other protocol that decides that they want to do that. But having the availability to do that just through competition is pretty neat, right? Because you don't even have to worry about the gas costs if the borrowing part of the HSI becomes incentivized through Hedron price appreciation towards the ceiling, right? I think that if and when that does start to happen, which would be nice, right? That means that the activity of Hedron would have to have the sentiment of Hedron very well understood, and the liquidity would have to be sufficient enough to be allowed to get to that price in the first place, to cause that arbitrage in Hedron in the first place. So having the markets all go up in a bull market could cause for more eyeballs, where people are going to value that a lot more, and they'll see the price of Hedron being more towards that particular arbitrage point. And it'll be a lot easier for them to do that when there's a lot less Hedron to be available to do that with. So when there are less assets to be provided across liquidity pairs, then they kind of more likely they'll be put on V3 in a way where it's a little bit more concentrated, because there's just not much of it that to be there. And if you do concentrate it, at least the price will be more attracted to that, right? And if you can concentrate it in a way where it overpowers any V2 availability, then it'll really kind of take ownership of where the price can go, and the liquidity providers can allow for the price to move through V3 and their appropriation of new liquidity at those higher prices. And Hedron would need that to happen. I think through time of just normal market structure, that Hedron will reach that through the burning and the rarity of it. I mean, it could be, and I'm not going to speak definitively, right? Because it's going to take a amount of time anyway, and I won't put a timeline on it. But potentially, the needing Hex to stake it as an HSI or just natively to mint Hedron could potentially make sense, right? I mean, if there was like a runaway of using the buyback function where it overloads the available auctions or puts them in a balance of where the amount of competition that's available at least creates these availabilities of, like what we were talking about earlier, about really orderly competition across the amount that's there versus the competition that's there, right? If there's 30 people and there's one, then the competition on the one could get pretty nasty, right? Depending on how big they are. But if there's 30 people on 15 and they were somehow to magically fall 2 to 2 to 2 to 2 to 2, and we all know that probably like 10 of them are all going to hammer on the one, and the other, amount are going to go pick apart the rest of them, that this is going to probably be the generalized understanding of how things are going to actually work in the big spectrum of things too. If you just kind of take it and bring the numbers to a smaller understanding of how it will work with less people and maybe less HSIs, then that's probably how it's going to end up falling out throughout the durations of the future. And we won't have any data of how it's really going to play until these auctions actually start. And we actually have like people actually utilizing the front end, which, like we said, it could get particularly hairy, all depending on when the 24-hour countdowns start and how many of them get started around the exact same time and when they actually come to an end. And then also reminding yourself that when they're coming to an end, that there's a whole new set of them that's hitting the default tab too. And you're going to have to be mindful of your own Hedron if you're competing to be able to take advantage of those things, which, like, other protocols are going to have people that are making these types of decisions that may not be aware of these types of things, right? And I can pretty much say that because I can probably let me take a look. I can pretty much guarantee, unless this particular individual went and made an alt that I'm not aware of and is in here just listen, that the executor is not.
So potentially there's going to be a lot of opportunity once people start running out of Hedron.
I mean, yeah, if that was the case, right? But there's like, if we were to say that there's 24 trillion circulating, right, and we've already taken out the SA, the only thing that we have left is a lot of that supply of that 20 trillion would be the OAs, right? So the OA hasn't sold any Hedron on market as of yet, but it did provide liquidity, and that liquidity wall that it put up is now sitting in liquidity as Hex right now. So its Hedron has been disseminated into the community as it sits anyway, and no longer is his. So that went into the circulating supply. So that got actually added in my calculation to the 2 trillion, but shouldn't have been, right? Because it currently isn't. It's Hex. So whatever. Probably less than that number, to less than 2 trillion, but still sitting like 23 trillion of circulating supply. But how much does the OA have? Probably about more than 10, maybe 12 trillion. I don't know. Somebody that has some stats, maybe I should look that up and get more definitive understanding of that. But let's just have fun here. And let's say that it was 10 or 12 trillion. That would leave over about 10 trillion of circulating supply to be burned. That would be crazy that within the first 3 days, that because that was available for people to go in there and like throw their weight around, because, 10 trillion kind of seems like a lot, right? But maybe in terms of the competition for those people, it may not be. And you have like a lot get burned. But even if 10 trillion was the generalized perception without actually looking at data of what the circulating supply would be that the community actually holds past the OA, the SA, and all the staked amount, even if we were to, I don't know, include that there was a certain amount of squids out of the a little over 1 trillion that they actually have staked between the 1,000 of them, goes back into circulating supply. It's not that much to really even consider, I guess, in the spectrum of things. But you could say, maybe there's 12 trillion circulating supply, and we burn 2 trillion of it. That at actual potential circulating supply, we're only sitting at 10 trillion at that point in time. That's a significant portion of 2 trillion that we would have burned, but maybe even in more, it could be higher than that. It could be 10, 14 trillion potentially in the YouTube streamers, 14% of the supply getting burned, based off the calculations of the max supply. 14% of the max supply potentially could be burned based on those current prices and other types of speculative things. But 10% of circulating supply of 112 trillion is not, it's not much, right? So if there was potential then to burn 14% of it, but you only have 10% available to the community out there, then the competition percentage means that people will probably find themselves in a position where they won't have enough Hedron, maybe potentially, to buy all of them, depending on how the competition goes between them. I mean, if it's a pretty old thing.
I wonder what like long-term, okay, let's just think a few years in the future and the amount of mintable Hedron from the existing hex stakes and potentially like future hex stakes, and relate that to the Hedron that's going to get burned continuously through the auctions, and like which way the pendulum would swing in regards to like would Hedron become more scarce, after that's all said and done? Because that's kind of, I'm trying to just look at from the most backed out perspective, like where does this potentially land us near the end of the bull market?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not even thinking in those terms, I guess. And I'm finding that if 30 trillion is staked and you can take out potential trillions of supply that could have otherwise either staked in the protocol and diluted us, or have the squids available to remove themselves from the staking pool to utilize their availability to use their Hedron in competition, or later on when there's HSIs that are sitting there because let's say bigger players exhausted themselves. Gas prices are going to be like the referee of this whole thing, I think, right? Causing for more order than chaos in a certain respect. People are going to make their decisions a little bit more carefully because of that. So I think that to think about it being like all chaos and all this stuff, and I find it hard to believe for people to just suddenly be very fucking reckless, right? Like maybe in some cases, some oddball cases, maybe so. But I would hope, I guess, for the most part, that because of gas prices, that would be your initial signal to take heed to the availability of the information that's on the front end and take it seriously with which ones you want to actually go for, and know when to hold them and know when to fold them, I guess would be the best case scenario. Because it's kind of like playing online poker without being able to see other people's faces and trying to bluff people out before it gets not advantageous to do that anymore.
Yeah, like what you and Crispy were saying, like there's going to be people bidding against themselves to kind of make, create a perception.
Yeah, maybe potentially keep people away from it, right? But you'll just never know, right? So yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, and then going through all this, like some percentages of people are going to be like, fuck all that. It sounds more advantageous for me to just stay staked and not go through all the trouble and spend any gas at all. I can just keep chilling right here and then, be rewarded that way. And then they'll have a better perspective of what's gone on in the auctions by just sitting back and eating popcorn and watching the fireworks happen. And then maybe later on, they'll come to the conclusion that now it's maybe their time to shine, or they just didn't find an opportunity. Maybe everything goes smashingly and they just get to sit there and watch the show go on and get reap rewards, and it just goes in any which way that we can't predict right now. But who knows?
A lot of the larger players in Hedron that staked had 2 wallets at least that they staked from, so they could have at least one wallet that was coming out at the 90-day period, so that would be released, so then they could bid.
Yeah, because you might as well be earning assets for the time you got to wait for the 90 days from launch when you were a day oneer and you knew it was coming. Right? Maybe even you knew that, so you made multiple wallets that had 90 days on it because you maximized the understanding and then added to the stake to reduce the staking terms down to 90 days. So
wonderful thing that feeds all of this is basically the T-shares, and it's the most, what a better thing to create hype and FOMO than T-shares on sale. I just don't see any way that this whole system isn't going to flourish. That's just me.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Well, you can't say for certain, but signs are looking pretty healthy. There's going to be an advantage and we're going to be able to take it and it'll be useful to everybody eventually. Just like Hex, just like Hedron has the potential. Hedron's already, done more than I expected it to do in the bear market, right? But Icosa presented a plot twist, right, to the whole thing. And it's quite the interesting thing how it operates. So let the show go on, right? We have been captivated. Let's check it out. Let's see what happens.